The cool evening breeze wafted through the open windows of the conference room, ruffling the pages of notes spread across the table. David sat quietly, reviewing his documents, waiting for the arrival of the Zalari delegates. So to him his colleague Mark, a seasoned diplomat, was double-checking the communication equipment. "Everything's set on your end, David?" Mark asked, glancing over his shoulder at the translation setup. "Yes, all systems are green. The Zalari language module is loaded and ready," David replied, tapping his tablet to confirm its readiness one last time. Just then the door opened with a gentle swoosh, and two Zalari delegates stepped into the room. They were tall and slender, with iridescent blue skin that shimmered under the room's lights. Their eyes were large and expressive, conveying a deep sense of calm. "Welcome to Earth," Mark began, standing to greet them with a smile. "I'm Mark Jennings, and this is David Harmon. We are honored to host you." "You." The Zalari nodded in unison. "We are pleased to be here," said the one on the left. Her voice harmonized with a melodic quality that the translation software rendered beautifully. "I am Rena, and this is my colleague Tolan." David stood and offered his hand, a gesture he had rehearsed, unsure if it was customary for the Zalari. To his relief, Rena accepted it, her hand cool and smooth against his. "As our primary liaison for language and culture, David will be assisting with all communication to ensure our discussions go smoothly," Mark explained, motioning towards David. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," David said. "I hope to make your visit as informative and comfortable as possible." Tolan, who had been quietly observing the room, spoke up. "We are eager to understand more about your species. We seek a fruitful dialogue between our peoples." "Let's begin by discussing our primary objectives for this meeting," Mark suggested, leading the group to the large oval table talv at the center of the room. As everyone took their seats, David pulled up a document on the screen. "Our goal is to establish a foundation for mutual understanding and potential cooperation in various fields including science, technology, and culture." Rena looked intrigued. "Cultural exchange is of particular interest to us. We believe it helps bridge the gaps between different worlds." David nodded, happy to find common ground. "Absolutely. We've prepared an overview of human culture, arts, governance, our scientific endeavors. Likewise, we're keen to learn about Zalarian culture. Perhaps we could start with a brief history of your civilization," Tolan suggested, his voice indicating genuine curiosity. Mark nodded, and David launched into a succinct overview of human history, highlighting key developments without dwelling too deeply on any one era. Rena listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions. "How do you manage conflict within your society?" she asked, a thoughtful frown crossing her features. David exchanged a glance with Mark before answering. "Through dialogue and legal systems primarily. It's complex, but we strive for peaceful resolutions." "And what of your personal experiences, David?" Rena inquired, turning her gaze to him. "What brought you to this role?" David paused, reflecting on his journey from a language student fascinated by alien cultures to a key figure in first contact scenarios. A desire to understand others, to communicate across the stars, he finally said. "It's always been about connection for me." As the meeting drew to a close, the atmosphere was optimistic. Handshakes were exchanged again, this time with a hint of warmth that hadn't been there at the beginning. "We look forward to our discussions over the coming days," Mark said, a genuine smile on his face. Rena nodded, her expression mirroring his. "As do we. Today marks the beginning of what we hope will be a long-standing friendship." As the Zalari left the room, David felt a surge of excitement about the days ahead. The initial barriers were breaking down, paving the way for a deeper, more meaningful exchange. This was just the beginning. The next morning, the Grand Hall of the United Nations was buzzing with activity. Diplomats and representatives from various countries mingled, awaiting the second day of talks with the Zalari delegates. David and his colleague, Tom, a cultural advisor, were setting up the presentation materials. "Think they'll be more relaxed today?" Tom asked, aligning his notes on the podium. David adjusted the projector. "Yesterday went well, so I hope they're feeling more comfortable now." As the clock struck 9, Rena and Tolan entered, accompanied by a new delegate, Joram, whose robust build and stern expression suggested a more formal demeanor than his companions. Good morning, Joram greeted the room, his voice deep and commanding. I am Joram, a member of the Zolari Council. I am here to observe and report on these discussions. Welcome, Counselor Joram, Tom replied, extending his hand. I'm Tom Harrison, and this is David Harmon. Joram nodded, accepting the handshake with a firm grip. I look forward to understanding your perspectives. The meeting began with a presentation on human governance. David and Tom alternated slides, explaining various political systems and their evolution over time. Why so many forms of governance? Joram interrupted, his brow furrowed in confusion. It reflects our diversity, Tom explained. Different cultures have different needs and histories, which influence their choice of governance. Rena chimed in, her tone curious. And these differences do not cause discord among your people. David shared a glance with Tom before responding. They can, but we also find strength in our diversity. It encourages dialogue and enriches our collective understanding. As the presentation continued, Tom introduced the concept of democracy, emphasizing the role of elections and civic participation. How do you ensure that the majority does not suppress the minority? Joram asked, genuinely puzzled. That's a significant challenge, David admitted. Laws, checks and balances, and international oversight are some ways we address this. The conversation shifted when Joram asked about cultural customs, leading Tom to share about various global festivals. Could you show us one of these festivals? Joram inquired, intrigued by the images of vibrant celebrations. Tom grinned. Actually, we have a small cultural fair set up in the courtyard today. Would you like to attend? The Zolari delegates agreed eagerly, and the group made their way to the courtyard where booths displayed arts, crafts, and foods from around the world. As they walked, David and Rena fell into easy conversation. This is quite different from Zolari gatherings, Rena observed, examining a booth showcasing Japanese origami. How so? David asked, handing her a finished crane. We gather mainly for ceremonial purposes. Much of our social interaction is structured and formal. David nodded, understanding the contrast with human spontaneity. Human gatherings serve many purposes: celebration, protest, remembrance. It's a way to express many facets of our lives. At a nearby booth, Tom was explaining the significance of music and cultural expression. He picked up a guitar and strummed a few chords, drawing a small crowd. Joram listened intently, his earlier reserve melting away a bit. There's a rhythm to it that feels universal, he commented. Yes, Tom agreed. Music is a language that transcends words. As the day drew to a close, the delegates had experienced a smorgasbord of human culture. From tasting Italian gelée to watching a capoeira demonstration, their initial hesitation gave way to a joyful curiosity, bridging the gap between their worlds. As they headed back to the conference room, Joram turned to David and Tom. Today was enlightening. We see many differences, but also the universal desire to connect and understand. David smiled. Exactly. And it's only by sharing our cultures that we truly learn from each other. The second day ended on a note of mutual appreciation, setting a positive tone for the discussions to come. The Zolari's interest in human culture was piqued, and David felt a surge of optimism about the days ahead. The morning was crisp and clear as David, accompanied by his colleague Eric, a specialist in extraterrestrial environmental systems, met Rena and Joram at the entrance of the United Nations Gardens. Today's agenda was less formal, focused on an exchange of knowledge about Earth's environmental practices and Zolari ecological management. Good morning, David greeted the Zolari. We thought we'd start today with something a bit different. Eric here is our expert on sustainable living environments. Eric shook hands with both delegates. Pleased to meet you. I'm excited to share and learn from your experiences as well. Joram, more relaxed than the previous days, nodded. We are particularly interested in your methods of balancing technological advancement with environmental preservation. As they strolled through the meticulously kept garden paths, Eric began discussing the integration of green technologies in urban areas. Here you see a variety of plant species, each chosen for its ability to thrive in urban settings with minimal water. It's part of our initiative to increase green spaces in cities without straining local resources. Rena, her eyes reflecting genuine interest, looked around. We have similar concepts on Zealer, though our plant life is quite different. I would love to compare our photosynthetic efficiencies. I can arrange for detailed data exchange on that, Eric offered, pulling out his tablet to show a graph of recent studies. As they passed a small pond, David pointed out the solar panels floating on the surface. These are part of a pilot project testing solar energy collection over water bodies without disrupting aquatic ecosystems. So Rietsiangus Joram remarked, examining the panels. Energy collection is a significant issue for us due to our planet's weaker sunlight. The beauty of these systems is their adaptability, Eric explained. Let's head to the lab where I can show you some adaptable technologies we're working on. The group made their way to a nearby environmental research facility. Inside, Eric led them to a lab where various models of wind turbines and bioenergy reactors were displayed. As Eric and Joram delved into a technical discussion, David and Rena continued their conversation about cultural practices related to environmental stewardship. On Zalar, every citizen participates in ecological maintenance from a young age, Rena shared. It fosters a deep connection with our environment. David nodded. There's a growing movement here towards that as well, increasing individual responsibility for the environment. It's crucial for the sustainability of our planet. Their discussion led them to a small conference room where Eric had set up a presentation on water purification technologies. Joram was particularly intrigued by a model that used nanotechnology for filtration. This could be highly effective on Zalar, Joram considered, examining the model closely. Could we consider a collaborative pilot project? Absolutely, Eric responded enthusiastically. Collaboration is the key to tackling global challenges. As the afternoon waned, the group decided to wrap up their tour. Today has been extremely productive, Joram stated, a note of satisfaction in his voice. I believe we are finding much common ground. Rena agreed, smiling warmly at David, and perhaps building a foundation for future cooperation not just in technology but in fostering a shared responsibility towards our planets. As they said their goodbyes, David felt a sense of accomplishment. The day had not only been about sharing knowledge but about building a bridge between human and Zalari ways of life through a mutual commitment to preserving their worlds. Eric clapped David on the back as they watched the Zalari depart. Seems like we're making this not just in talks, but in understanding each other's worlds. David nodded, his thoughts already on the possibilities the next few days could bring. It's just the beginning, but it's a good start. As the sun dipped below the skyline, casting a golden glow over the city, David prepared for an evening that was less about diplomacy and more about human connection. Tonight he was hosting a small dinner at his apartment for Rena and a couple of his colleagues, hoping to showcase a slice of everyday human life. Rena arrived, accompanied by David's close friend and fellow linguist, Michael. As David opened the door, he was greeted by their smiling faces, carrying a bouquet of earth flowers mixed with luminescent Stellari flora, a symbol of their growing friendship. Welcome to my home, David said, taking the bouquet. These are beautiful, thank you. Rena's eyes gleamed with curiosity as she entered. Michael has been telling me about your cooking. I am eager to experience it. Michael laughed. David's culinary skills are almost as good as his linguistic talents. As David led them to the kitchen, the table was set for a casual meal. I hope you're ready for a traditional Earth cuisine Italian pasta with a twist of local ingredients. The conversation flowed easily as David put the finishing touches on the meal. Rena was fascinated by the variety of ingredients, each with its own story and place in human culture. As much as food sustains us, it's also a form of expression, David explained, serving the pasta onto plates. Each dish tells a story about the people and the region it comes from. Rena tasted the pasta, her expression thoughtful. It's similar on Zalar. Meals are communal, and each ingredient is chosen for its contribution to the harmony of flavors. Michael, always keen to find parallels, added, That's a beautiful way to think about it. Perhaps our next project should be a cookbook, Interstellar Recipes for Peace. Laughter filled the room, easing the remnants of formal tension. After dinner, they moved to the living room with glasses of wine. David chose this moment to delve into a more personal conversation. Rena, back at the UN, you asked about the human experience beyond our politics and technology. What about Zalari? What drives you personally? Rena paused, her gaze settling on the city lights outside. Curiosity, always curiosity. It's what brought me to your planet. And now, being here, learning about your culture, it's more fascinating than I could have imagined. The discussion shifted to emotions, a concept Rena found intriguing due to its complexity in human behavior. Emotions can be both a strength and a weakness for us, David shared. They drive our passions but can also lead us astray. And how do you manage them? Rena asked, genuinely curious. We learn to understand them, Michael chimed in. Art, music, literature, they're all channels for expressing and processing our feelings. As the evening grew late, the conversation turned to the concept of love, a particularly human idea that Rena was still trying to comprehend. Love can be challenging to define, David said, choosing his words carefully. It's caring for someone else's happiness as much as your own. Rena considered this, then smiled softly. I think I am beginning to see. It's not just a necessity for survival, but something that enriches your life. Yes, exactly, David agreed, his heart light. And it's not just romantic love. It's the love between friends, like the bond I hope is forming among us. As the night ended, Rena stood to leave, her expression warm. Thank you, David Michael. Tonight was enlightening. I am taking away more than just a taste of your cuisine. David and Michael escorted her to the door, feeling a sense of accomplishment. The evening had not only bridged cultural gaps but had touched on the universal themes that connected all sentient beings. Until tomorrow, Rena, David said as she departed. Until tomorrow, she echoed, stepping into the night that somehow seemed less alien than before. The following morning brought a fresh challenge. The diplomatic meetings were to resume at the UN, and David was early to arrive, going over his notes for the day's agenda. His colleague, Sam, a communications specialist, joined him with a look of concern etched across his face. David, we have a problem, Sam began as he approached, his tablet displaying a series of messages. There's been a significant misunderstanding about yesterday's informal discussions. David's brow furrowed as he took the tablet. What happened? It seems some of the Zalari interpreters misconstrued our discussions on emotional expression as a discussion on political dissent. Joram is particularly upset. He thinks we were discussing subversive activities. Subversive? That's not at all what we were talking about. David felt a rush of frustration. This was the last thing they needed when things were just starting to go well. We need to clarify this before it escalates, Sam suggested. Maybe bring Rena into the conversation. She understands our nuances better. David nodded, his mind racing for solutions. Set up a meeting with Joram and Rena as soon as they arrive. We can't let this misunderstanding fester. Soon after, Rena and Joram arrived, the latter's expression guarded and cool. David greeted them with a calm demeanor, hoping to diffuse any tension right from the start. Joram, Rena, thank you for meeting with us quickly. There seems to be a misunderstanding that we need to address, David began, leading them into a private meeting room. Joram crossed his arms, his voice firm. I was informed that there were discussions about manipulating emotions for political gain. Such tactics are strictly against Zalari principles. David exchanged a glance with Sam, who quickly chimed in. There's been a mistake, Joram. Our conversation was about how humans use art and culture to express emotions, not manipulate them for political ends. Rena, who had been quiet, spoke up. I was there, Joram. The humans share their emotions through art as a way of understanding each other better, not for manipulation. David saw an opening to clarify further. Our emotional expressions, whether through art, music, or literature, are ways we connect with each other on a personal level. They're not tools for political coercion. Joram's posture softened slightly, his expression shifting from suspicion to contemplation. This is a very different concept from our practices. On Zalar, emotions are private. Public expressions are always scrutinized for their communal impact. Here on Earth, we often find that sharing our emotions publicly can lead to better mutual understanding and support among people, Sam explained, hoping to bridge the gap in their cultural understanding. David added, It's all about context, Joram. In a democratic society, such freedoms are essential. They help us confront and cope with various personal and societal challenges. Rena nodded, turning to Joram. Perhaps it's this difference in context that led to the misunderstanding. The humans have no ill intentions towards us or their own people. Joram took a moment to process, then nodded. I appreciate your clarification. Misunderstandings can be dangerous, especially between our worlds. David felt a wave of relief. Thank you for understanding, Joram. It's crucial we maintain open and honest communication. As the meeting concluded on a positive note, David and Sam escorted the Zalari out. If there's ever any doubt or question about our discussions, please bring them directly to us, David offered, his tone earnest. Joram managed a small smile. I will. Today was a valuable lesson in the importance of clear communication. As they parted ways, Sam patted David on the back. Well handled, David. Crisis averted. David let out a long breath, grateful for the resolution. For today, at least, let's keep our channels open and clear. It's the only way this is going to work. The incident had underscored the delicate nature of their task, but reaffirmed the commitment of both sides to understanding and cooperation. The next day brought a shift in the atmosphere as David and his colleague, Alan, a senior policy advisor, prepared for a roundtable discussion on the more challenging aspects of human society. Today's topic was about how humans handle internal and external conflicts without resorting to physical confrontations. The aim was to provide the Zalari with insights into human diplomacy and conflict resolution strategies. As the Zalari delegates filed into the room, Alan whispered to David, let's make sure we keep things straightforward today. After yesterday's hiccup, we need a smooth session. David nodded, setting up his notes. Agreed. Let's focus on the constructive aspects. Once everyone was settled, David began the session with a warm smile. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to discuss some of the methods humans use to manage conflicts. Our history hasn't always been peaceful, but we've developed various ways to mitigate disputes. Rena, who had become an avid participant, leaned forward. Could you provide examples of these methods? Alan took the lead. Certainly, Rena. One of the primary tools is diplomacy, engaging in dialogue to address and resolve differences before they escalate. Joram seemed particularly interested. What happens when dialogue fails? David answered, That's a great question. When dialogue stalls, we often turn to mediation or arbitration, where a neutral third party helps facilitate a solution. It's like having a referee in a sport. The conversation turned to specific examples, with Alan detailing a recent international dispute that was resolved through negotiation. The key was understanding the other side's needs and fears, and then finding a common ground that respected those concerns. Rena nodded thoughtfully. It seems that empathy is a significant component of your conflict resolution. It is, David confirmed. Understanding where the other person is coming from can often bridge the gap between conflicting positions. As the discussion deepened, the Zalari delegates asked about the role of public opinion in human conflicts. Alan explained the influence of media and public demonstrations. People can express their dissent through peaceful protests, Alan said. It's a way for voices to be heard without violence, influencing leaders and policies. Joram looked skeptical. And these methods always work. Not always, David admitted, but they provide a framework for trying to resolve issues without resorting to war or violence. It's about constant effort and negotiation. The delegates seemed to appreciate the honesty, and the discussion moved on to how these strategies could be adapted for Zalari use. David and Alan facilitated a brainstorming session, with each delegate suggesting how similar approaches could be integrated into Zalari society. As the meeting drew to a close, Rena stayed behind to speak with David. Your world is complex, but your commitment to fighting conflicts without fighting each other is commendable. David smiled, appreciating her words. It's a continuous challenge, Rena, but one worth undertaking. Every step towards peace is a step forward for all of us. Rena nodded, her expression serious yet hopeful. I have much to reflect on and share with my people. As they left the conference room, Alan gave David a nod of approval. Good session, David. I think they're starting to see the nuances of how we handle our issues. David felt a sense of accomplishment. Thanks, Alan. It's about showing that despite our flaws, we strive for better solutions. Let's keep the momentum going. Walking back to his office, David felt a renewed purpose. The exchange was not just about presenting human strategies, it was about learning from each other, fighting the good fight together. Lucas, arranging his papers, turned to David. This is where we bring everything together. Our discussions on conflict resolution, cultural exchange, they all feed into this treaty. David nodded, checking his laptop one last time. It's about finding balance. We have to ensure that the treaty respects both our needs and those of the Zalari. As the Zalari delegates entered, led by Rena and Joram, they were joined by a new delegate, Zorak, an expert in Zalari legal systems. Introductions were brisk and focused, with a clear air of determination settling over the room. "Shall we begin?" Lucas proposed, motioning everyone to take their seats around the large oval table. Joram opened the discussion. "We appreciate the efforts to formulate a treaty that respects our cultural and political frameworks. However, we must ensure our environmental and security concerns are addressed comprehensively." Lucas pulled up a document on the screen. "Let's start with environmental cooperation. We believe that joint research initiatives and shared technology programs can help us address these concerns effectively." Zorak, reviewing the document closely, added, "On Zilar, we have strict protocols for technology used to minimize ecological impact. We'd like to include a clause that any shared technology meets these protocols." David typed the suggestion into the draft. "That's a fair point. We can establish a bilateral committee to oversee the implementation of technologies on both planets." Conversations shifted toward security. Reno expressed her concerns. "While we are committed to peace, our people will need assurances of non-aggression and mutual defense against external threats." Lucas nodded, understanding the sensitivity of the topic. "We propose a mutual defense pact, only to be activated by mutual agreement in cases of external threats." As the hours passed, the dialogue remained intense but productive. David and Lucas worked closely with the Zalari to word each clause carefully, ensuring clarity and mutual benefit. When they reached the section on cultural exchange, David suggested, "We should include provisions for educational exchanges and cultural festivals. These can serve as foundational activities to deepen our understanding and strengthen ties." Zorak looked pleased. "Yes, we value learning. Regular cultural exchanges could become the cornerstone of our relationship." As they finalized the draft, Joram leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "This treaty, it goes beyond mere words and agreements. It's about laying the groundwork for future generations." David felt a surge of pride. "Exactly, Joram. It's about creating a framework that will allow both our peoples to collaborate and thrive." With the draft completed, the delegates agreed to review it with their respective governments. Handshakes were exchanged, this time with a sense of accomplishment and mutual respect. As the Zalari left the room, Lucas clapped David on the shoulder. "Well done. This could really be something transformative." David looked at the treaty on his screen, a testament to days of hard work and dialogue. "Let's hope. It's a step towards something bigger than any of us." Reflecting on the day's successes, David realized the importance of every conversation they'd had. Each had built upon the last, creating a comprehensive understanding that had made this preliminary treaty possible. It was a significant milestone, not just in his career but in the history of human-alien relations. The day of the treaty signing was clear and crisp, an almost poetic backdrop for the historic event. David, alongside his colleague, Jonathan, who had played a critical role in the negotiation phases, arrived early at the venue, a beautifully appointed hall in the United Nations building, adorned with flags of both Earth and Zilar. As they made final preparations, Jonathan looked around, impressed. "Can you believe we're here, David? This is really happening." David smiled, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. "It's surreal, isn't it? From those initial awkward meetings to this." Soon the hall began to fill with diplomats, officials, and media from both worlds. The air buzzed with the murmur of various languages and the clicking of cameras. David spotted Rena and Joram among the arriving delegates, their expressions serious but hopeful. "Good to see you," David greeted them as they approached. "Nervous?" "A bit," Rena admitted, looking around at the gathering crowd. "It's a big day." Joram nodded in agreement. "A very big day. This treaty is just the beginning, I hope." Jonathan, ever the peacemaker, added, "It's a solid foundation. and it's built on mutual understanding and respect, which is the best kind. The ceremony began with speeches from leaders of both planets. Earth's Secretary General spoke eloquently about the journey of coming together in the face of uncertainty, emphasizing the shared future the treaty promised. Joram, representing Zelar, delivered a powerful speech about the opportunities and challenges ahead. Today we commit not just to cooperation, but to learning from each other, to building a relationship that stands the test of time. After the speeches, the moment of signing arrived. David watched as Earth's and Zelar's representatives took up their pens. The silence in the room was palpable as they signed, each stroke marking a commitment to peace and collaboration. The crowd erupted in applause as the last signature was etched onto the document. Cameras flashed, capturing the smiles of the signatories as they shook hands, the treaty held high between them. As the formalities concluded, the assembly moved to a less formal reception. David and Jonathan mingled with guests, receiving congratulations and discussing potential first steps under the new agreement. Rena joined them, her eyes sparkling with relief and joy. "Thank you, David, for everything. Your patience and understanding have been invaluable." David chuckled. "It was a team effort, Rena. We all worked hard to make this happen." Jonathan raised his glass in a toast to new beginnings and a prosperous future. The group echoed his sentiment, clinking glasses. As the reception continued, David stepped aside for a moment, looking over the balcony at the city below. The weight of the accomplishment settled on him, mixed with a hopeful anticipation of what was to come. "Thinking about the future?" Jonathan asked, joining him at the railing. David nodded. "Yeah, it's going to be an interesting journey. There's so much potential." Jonathan smiled, patting David on the back. "And we'll be there every step of the way. Who knows what we'll achieve together?" As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the city, David felt a profound sense of peace. The treaty was just a piece of paper, but it represented so much more: a promise of cooperation, of facing the unknown together, and of a united future that now seemed more reachable than ever. "Let's get back to the celebration," Jonathan suggested, his voice full of optimism. "After all, this is just the beginning." Returning to the festivities, David felt ready for whatever challenges and triumphs lay ahead. With the treaty as their guide, humans and Zelari could look forward to a future not just of coexistence, but of shared success and enduring friendship.